I forgot to mention that Keith and Tori are here with their new baby Kent. Stand up and Lion King that baby. Lift that baby up and let us see that baby. Yes, baby Kent, welcome to the world in our congregation. The sermon is about invitation. Invitation. Invitation as a spiritual practice. What does it mean to say invitation as a spiritual practice? Well, first we have to break down what spiritual practice is. And for me, a spiritual practice is anything you do with your mind or body that aligns or realigns you with the highest version of yourself, with your highest aspiration of good in the world. It's something you do daily, weekly. It's a ritual. It brings pause. And it brings you back to what you value, what you love. Gives you a deep sense of meaning and purpose. And so it should transport you mentally, emotionally, from despair to hope, from feeling lost or stuck to feeling affirmed and okay with life just the way it is, for better and for worse. And so a spiritual practice is a bridge from the busyness of life to a place of calm, a place of serenity, where you are not surviving, but you are thriving. A spiritual practice should ground you with that ground of being, however you describe it. The ground of being, your higher S, self, is not driven by ego, reputation, ambition, but a deep-centered knowing. Some examples of this, meditation, prayer, yoga, journaling, mindfulness practice, volunteering, nature walks, running, exercise, reading sacred texts. Maybe you're into doing chants, or my favorite, singing. And coming to church on Sunday is a spiritual practice. And when you leave, you should feel better. So I've defined spiritual practice. Now, what does it mean to be invitational? Invitation as a spiritual practice. To be more inviting means that you are literally opening the spaces that you occupy. You are opening your heart to the spaces that you occupy. You're welcoming them to others so that they feel more comfortable in the space that you're in, that they feel valued and included. They should feel when they're around you that they are welcome to be with you through your words and your actions. We experienced this Friday night. We had our first chalice circle. We had about 21 people. This is, we called them small groups or zip code groups, and we did that very similar to what you all did in Connecting Conversation, but it's a little more structured with the chalice circles. We did it Friday night. We broke into smaller groups. We came back and shared out, and it was a good time. People accepted that invitation, and they came. And being inviting is more than just being polite or just friendly. It's actually an action. And it embodies a sort of generosity of spirit. When you're willing to share your time, your attention, and your resources. And it's not just about waiting for people, to reach out to you first. It's you extending, you engaging, taking the initiative, being available and present, offering not just space, but a place of belonging. So spiritually speaking, to be inviting means recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of every person, the namaste in the other. An acknowledgement of our interconnectedness and interrelatedness, lowering our barriers. It's a kind of vulnerability. It's not kind of, it is vulnerability. Widening our circle because we really believe in our soul that we flourish when all people flourish. Now, I want to share two quick stories with you about invitation. Situations that weren't exactly warm and fuzzy for me. In one, someone reached out and invited me, and I accepted the invitation. In another, I had to invite myself to enter into a space I wasn't comfortable with, but I did anyway. And both turned into a blessing, not just for me, but for the other person too. Now, I'm starting my 16th year here, but before I got here, I was called to another congregation, Davies Memorial Unitarian Universalist Church in Camp Springs, Maryland, near Andrews Air Force Base in Prince George's County. And there I entered eager and became a member right away, then a board member, then a candidate for UU ministry, and then the part-time director of outreach to help them grow in numbers. They were a small church. Then I became their co-minister, and then eventually the solo minister, all in the span of about 8 years. And as my position and power changed, so did some of my relationships with people. There were some negative comments that emerged that were mean and racial. And then I was ordained in this church. That's when you get the title Reverend. I was ordained, then installed as the co-minister, and the comments continued. And one member told me that her husband was leaving the church because he said, quote, "I don't like what he's doing. He's trying to turn this into a black church." And of course, this made me angry. We played a little gospel and a little R&B. I hired a sister to do some singing and had a band. What we consider cool now wasn't cool back then. In a UU context, I just kept thinking, dude, loosen up. And he left for like 2 years. But Sunday after Sunday, his wife kept coming, and she'd go home, tell him everything he was missing, how much fun it was, all the new faces. They were only a gray hymnal church. Some of y'all know what I'm talking about. But we were growing. That church became one of the most diverse, if not the most diverse Unitarian Universalist church in the country. I'll show you a picture. You come in my office, I'll show you a picture. I'm not making this up. So his wife wore him. He decided he would come back. And then, he came back slowly, very suspiciously. But after a while, he just called me out of nowhere and said, hey, he had a membership at Andrews Air Force Base. He was a veteran. He said, hey, you want to come hit some golf balls with me and get some lunch? I said, sure. And of course, I didn't know how to golf. I had like 20-year-old clubs that I got from the pawn shop, and I took those with me. But it was a driving range, so I didn't have to use them, thank God. But it wasn't long before he knew I didn't know how to golf. I tore that driving range up. But he laughed and laughed, and then, of course, he started giving me pointers, and we finished up. We went and got some lunch. It was a long day, but afterward, he shook my hand. He said, you know, I was wrong, and I'm back. And he came back, and he's still there, and he keeps coming. He admitted that he had judged me wrongly, and I forgave him. Well, then there was long-term member George at Davies. I say his name because he's dead, so, you know. If you give me a hard time and you die, your name might come up. I'm just saying. But good old George was from South Carolina, and he's as he says, I'm a Roosevelt Republican. Not Roosevelt, Roosevelt. One of the biggest givers in the church. George just didn't like me. He didn't want me to be a minister at his church. He complained about everything I did, my clothes, the way I pronounced my words, my sermons, my singing. He didn't get me. I didn't get him. And he once asked me, where'd you come from? And I said, in my car down the street. I drove here in my car. I was being a smartass on purpose. Once I didn't have any clean undershirts. This is a time where I was busy raising kids, and that Sunday you wake up, do I wear a dirty undershirt? I don't know. I just grabbed a clean T-shirt, and I knew it had writing on it, so I turned it backwards, you know, because I had my white shirt on. I didn't want the T-shirt, so I put it on backwards. But during the course of that Sunday, I got hot and took my jacket off, and George was sitting right behind me. And he told my minister friend who was there with me at the time, Don, you want him to be a minister? He doesn't even know how to dress. Yeah, I've never worn a T-shirt under my dress shirt since then. Yeah, it scarred me. And it made me angry. Good old George. Some years later, I was a solo minister at this time, and he was in a hospital dying. And I did not want to go see him. I knew he would probably insult me. I just didn't want to be bothered, but something inside of me said, go. He's a human being. You want to be a minister, you have to love the unlovable. And that spirit prevailed, and so I went, nervous. I went. But before I stopped at the grocery store, and I've never done this since, bought a gift basket with fruit and candies. I was trying to make a peace offering. I didn't really know how to approach George, so I bought him a big gift basket with money I really couldn't afford at the time. I got there, and George did exactly what I expected. He complained and complained. He talked about my colleague who had just left. For a long period of time, he talked about him. So I knew if I ever left, he was going to talk about me. He talked about the church needing a new roof. He talked about needing more people pledging. He went on, and I listened. And after he was done, I touched his forehead, and I said a prayer for him. And then I got up to leave, and just like in a movie, right as I got to the door to grab the door to open it to leave, George said, John. I turned around, yes, George. You're all right with me. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. And I left, not knowing if I had any impact, but after his death, at his memorial service, his wife said to me that it really meant a lot to him that I visited him. She said he was a complicated man. He grew up in a really hard time. I told her I understood, and I did. But something happened in both of those scenarios with George and with the other member at the church. Those invitations that were accepted invited the best versions of ourselves to emerge. Something happened that changed us both. I saw George, George saw me. I saw my friend at the golf course, he saw me. When you practice living a life of invitation, you have to live your life as if no one is a stranger. You live your life giving people second and third and fourth chances. I'm not talking about being in an abuse situation, that's different. I'm talking about reconciling, being invitational, having an open heart because you know people are going through stuff and projecting it back at you. And no one is exempt from this human condition. When you see life that way, it brings out the empathy and compassion. So, invitation as a spiritual practice is about saying yes to life. And yes opens us up, but no kind of constricts us. Stepping out of that comfort zone into that unknown of possibility. Seeing the divine in every person, in every situation. Our congregation practices and can continue to practice this in countless ways. We can be more invitational in this community, showing people that they are loved and valued, that we want you here. There was a story that I can share with you. One member Friday night said that Laura said to her, "You will be known here." Not welcome here. You will be known here. That kind of spirit of invitation. And that's why this fall we're going to do Bring a Friend Sunday. I think all your BFFs should be here. Like, if you're, like, what kind of friend are you if you haven't invited your best friend to this awesome church? And if I was your best friend and I found out 10 years later that this is what you were doing on Sunday, I'd be so mad at you. Bring a Friend Sunday. This place should be busting at the seams, especially with what's going on in our world. This is a dynamic ministry. It's a good ministry. And I still believe that Unitarian Universalism, especially this congregation, can be the religion for its time for the 21st century. I still believe that 25 years later. And we have to become more invitational to make that manifest. Invitational in our hearts. I shared 2 negative stories with you today, but the truth is, I've had more, but the truth is, you always remember the negative ones more than you remember the positive ones. The truth is the positive experiences outweigh the negative ones by 100-fold. My experience being a Unitarian Universalist has always been one of welcoming. Everyone can't say that. I hate to say. But I can say that. And I can say that because of my willingness to not hold on to grudges, my willingness to let go, my willingness to see people's humanity, my willingness to know that I don't have it all figured out, my willingness to humble myself. And because of that, I believe I have had those mostly really good experiences with people, even when they said something stupid to me. Open your heart. Friends, let us commit today to lives of invitation. Let us be bold in our willingness to open our hearts. And with this sacred practice, may we discover the divine invitation that is always calling us, standing at the door, knocking, calling us to that deeper love that leads us to that sweet, sweet peace that truly surpasses understanding. Amen.
we take in the